September 11th, 2001 started as any other school day. I was right in the beginning of second period. The kids had just gotten in and settled down. I remember it was very hot. My school did not have air conditioning at that time. And in New Jersey, September can be very hot and very humid. Because of that, I had the windows all open and I had the door to the hallway open, which I didn't usually do because I'm a pretty loud teacher. And with the hallway door open, I remember I was getting class started, and a student I had a couple years before, who I knew as a theater kid, very dramatic, and I absolutely adored her, came to my door with a very serious look on her face. And she said, "A plane just hit the World Trade Center." And immediately, skeptic that I am, I look at her, I notice the, proclivity for drama, and I was like, what do you mean, like a Cessna? Like a small plane? And she didn't break character. She just said, no, a big plane. And I couldn't process that. I'm like, what do you mean a big plane hit the World Trade Center? I was like, all right, go to class. And she's a teacher now, by the way. So she left, and then about 10 minutes later, my vice principal comes walking down the hall, calls me over, and says very quietly to me, "A plane hit the World Trade Center." And I said, "She just told me that. What do you mean? Like a Cessna, a small plane?" And he said, "No, a commercial airliner. Turn on your TV." So I walk over to the TV that was hanging in the corner of the classroom. I turned it on, and by this point, we're watching the World Trade Center on fire, and we're seeing the chaos that's going on in New York. And I couldn't process what was happening. And the students, every TV in the school was tuned to this because it was just such a major event in our lives. And I looked back at the students to see what their reactions were, and one of the girls in the class, just all the blood drained from her face. And I looked at her and I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "My dad works in the building next to the World Trade Center." And my heart dropped. I said to her, "Okay, no cell phones really at that time for kids." I said, "Why don't you go to the office and call your mom?" And so she starts crying. I have somebody go with her. She goes to the office. And after that, after she had walked out of the room, maybe like 5 minutes later, the second plane hits. And we watch it in real time. And I don't know, anybody who hasn't experienced it, I don't know if you can really comprehend what it was like. It was almost like a movie. And still we're watching this and we're seeing it. It was dead silent. The entire school was dead silent because we're saying we're sitting in a school in South Jersey right now, and this is happening in New York City, 2 hours away from us right now. And we see people, cameras, people running from the scene. The buildings hadn't collapsed yet, but it was just utter chaos in New York, and nobody could speak. Nobody could process what we were watching in real time. And for the rest of the day, classes moved silently. There really wasn't chatter. There wasn't any kind of noise. Everybody was almost like zombies going from class to class. And what do we do? I don't remember if we went home early. Maybe somebody who teaches at my school I don't remember. But we were at the point where the buildings collapsed, and then we saw people who had just gone to work that day to have a regular day running from billowing smoke and debris clouds out of New York City. And it just wasn't registering. We were absolutely numb. As we got home that night, everybody was glued to their TVs. We later heard the Pentagon was hit. We later heard another plane went down. And everybody was saying, is that it? Or then all the planes were grounded. But even after all that happened, we're just sitting there watching the aftermath, the trauma that everybody was going through, the trauma that we were going through, watching this as a nation. And it was incredibly sobering. It was something that, you just could not wrap your head around. In the wake of that horrible, horrible event where thousands of people died instantly, days later, and people are still dying from the effects of 9/11, what happened in the weeks and months following that event is that we actually unified as Americans. I've never seen a time in my lifetime where there were more flags around, people putting flags outside their home, American pride. People were nicer to each other. People had a commonality, a thing to talk about. We had this sense of community because this happened to us collectively. And it was something that I hadn't experienced before, and I really haven't experienced again. And as a teacher, all of us, we spoke about this when the kids needed to talk about it or when they had questions. We really tried to inform ourselves as much as possible of what was going on, what was rumor or speculation, and tried to make it teachable moments, talking about the sense of community, how people could help, what they could do to volunteer. We have many people from our local police force who went to New York immediately and volunteered. So we talked about all of the opportunities to come together as a community. But there is a lesson that I learned as a teacher that I would like to express to other teachers, especially younger teachers. And I was a younger teacher at that time. After that point, if something major was going on in the news, I never turned the TV on again. That girl's face when I turned on the TV and she said, "My father works in the building next to the World Trade Center," is something that I'll never forget. And it is one of the major lessons I took with me after 9/11.